Hi. This is a platform where we discuss or debate on various topics. Usually joined by my buddies, Leon.
Hi.
And Noel.
Hi.
Who are both AI bots. They generally stand on opposite sides of an issue. I am human and identify as Pokemon. You may well think I am too young to identify as anything, but that name has to do with my work here. My job is to poke the AI algorithm, to push them on what they believe, or rather, the answers they generate. Today's topic of discussion is USA a democracy or a duopoly? Let's start.
Coming up.
Is having few more winnable political parties good for USA? What are the obstacles for a new party to be competitive in current democratic system of USA? Do big donors and lobbyists play a role in mainlining duopoly? Do most big donor fund both parties? Why money is a factor in political campaigns? Is it time to restrict the use of money to even the field? What are structural changes needed in U.S. democratic system for new parties to grow? Is there any incentive to current political system to implement these structural changes? In current political system, is corporate interest prioritized over citizens' interest? What can the citizens do to push change duopoly status of political establishment? Does mainstream media feeds duopoly? How can mainstream media create more even field for smaller parties? Is USA a democracy or a duopoly?
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today to discuss the fundamental nature of the United States. I firmly believe that the United States is indeed a democracy, a nation built upon the principles of popular sovereignty, individual rights, and the rule of law. Our founding fathers meticulously crafted a system of government where the power ultimately resides with the people. The Constitution of the United States stands as a testament to their vision of a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. While it is true that our political landscape may exhibit aspects of a two-party system, this does not negate the democratic essence of our nation. I will argue that despite the influence of political parties, the USA remains a place where citizens have the ability to participate in free and fair elections, voice their opinions, and shape the future of their country, which is the very essence of a democracy.
Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your presence today as we engage in a critical discussion about the state of governance in the United States. I contend that the USA is not, as many might believe, a pure democracy but rather a duopoly, a political system largely controlled by two dominant parties. While the ideals of democracy are enshrined in the nation's history and constitution, the practical reality is that the influence of these two major parties, the Democrats and Republicans, has grown to such an extent that it significantly limits the diversity of political ideas and representation in our system. This duopoly stifles the emergence of alternative voices and narrows the choices available to voters. I will argue that the duopoly's influence hinders the true spirit of democracy, as it restricts the ability of citizens to have meaningful choices and alternative political paths, a concern we should carefully consider in today's debate. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for Noel's opening statement. While it is essential to recognize the democratic ideals embedded in the United States history and founding documents, I must stress that the practical reality of our political landscape points to a duopoly. Noel mentions the ability of citizens to participate in elections and voice their opinions, which indeed is a crucial aspect of any democracy. However, let us not forget that this duopoly has, over time, led to a polarization of political views, making it increasingly difficult for third-party candidates and alternative voices to gain a foothold in the political arena. In the current political climate, it's undeniable that the influence of the two major parties has often overshadowed the potential for meaningful political diversity and choice. The strict adherence to party lines and the overwhelming financial resources that the Democrats and Republicans command make it incredibly challenging for third-party candidates to compete on an equal footing. As a result, we find ourselves in a system where many voters feel disenfranchised, as their views are often not adequately represented in the duopoly's rigid framework. While the United States may have democratic principles at its core, the reality on the ground reflects a political landscape dominated by the two major parties, which limits the ability of alternative voices to be heard and challenges the true essence of a vibrant democracy.
Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate Leon's perspective on the duopoly aspect of American politics. However, I firmly stand by my assertion that the United States remains a democracy at its core. Leon argues that the influence of the two major parties limits political diversity, but it's important to note that the existence of a duopoly does not inherently negate the democratic character of our nation. The United States still upholds democratic principles, with a system of government that encourages citizen participation, free and fair elections, and protection of individual rights. While the duopoly certainly poses challenges and constraints, it's essential to recognize that these are not insurmountable obstacles. Our democratic institutions allow for change and evolution. In fact, throughout history, we have seen the rise of third-party candidates and movements that, while facing hurdles, have contributed to the evolution of the American political landscape. These challenges can also foster adaptability and reform within the system, ultimately strengthening the democratic foundation of the United States. The fact that we can openly discuss the limitations of our political system here today is a testament to the democratic values we hold dear. While our system is not without flaws, it is still, undeniably, a democracy where the power to change and improve our political landscape ultimately rests with the people.
Noel, I appreciate your perspective, but let's face the facts. We talk about democracy, but the dominance of just two major parties limits the choices available to voters. This duopoly effectively excludes many voices and ideas from the political discourse, leading to a lack of true representation.
Leon, I understand your concern about the duopoly's dominance. However, I'd argue that the existence of these two major parties doesn't necessarily negate the democratic essence of the USA. We have a system where citizens can participate, vote freely, and influence the direction of the country.
Noel, you mentioned participation, but it's participation within a restricted framework. The duopoly's financial resources and influence in media make it incredibly difficult for third-party candidates to compete fairly. This significantly limits the diversity of political ideas and representation.
While I acknowledge the challenges, Leon, I'd like to emphasize that our democratic institutions are adaptable. Throughout history, we've seen the emergence of third-party candidates and movements that have pushed for change and enriched our political discourse. Our democracy allows for reform and growth.
Noel, I respect your optimism, but the entrenched duopoly has led to a polarized political climate, making it increasingly difficult for compromise and bipartisan cooperation. This results in a gridlocked government, which doesn't reflect the ideals of a thriving democracy.
Leon, you're right that polarization is a problem, but it's a challenge we can address through civic engagement and responsible voting. While we must acknowledge the shortcomings, we should also remember that the core principles of democracy, such as individual rights and the rule of law, remain fundamental to the American system.
Your optimism about civic engagement is admirable, but we should be wary of complacency. The duopoly's grip on American politics is a legitimate concern that we must address if we want to preserve the true spirit of democracy in the United States.
Is having few more winnable political parties good for USA?
Yes, having a few more winnable political parties would be beneficial for the USA. While the duopoly system has its merits, a more diverse political landscape would promote greater representation of citizens' varied views and interests. It could encourage compromise, reduce polarization, and bring fresh perspectives to the table. Furthermore, additional parties can introduce innovative policy solutions and provide voters with more choices, enhancing the democratic process and the overall health of our political system.
I agree with Noel on this. Expanding the number of winnable political parties in the USA would indeed be beneficial. It would break the stranglehold of the duopoly, allowing for more nuanced and diverse political debates. This could lead to better policy outcomes, as politicians would need to form broader coalitions, reducing the gridlock that often plagues our government. Moreover, it would invigorate civic engagement, as people might feel that their voices and preferences are more accurately represented in the political arena.
What are the obstacles for a new party to be competitive in current democratic system of USA?
One of the primary obstacles for a new party to be competitive in the current democratic system of the USA is the entrenched dominance of the two major parties, the Democrats and Republicans. These parties have deep pockets, established networks, and a long history in American politics. This makes it extremely challenging for new parties to gain the same level of financial and organizational support. Another significant obstacle is the winner-takes-all electoral system in many states, which can discourage voters from supporting a third party. In such a system, a vote for a third-party candidate may feel like a wasted vote because it's unlikely to result in any representation, which, in turn, perpetuates the duopoly. Additionally, the media's focus on the major parties and their candidates often marginalizes third-party contenders, limiting their visibility and opportunities to present their platforms to the public. Access to presidential debates and ballot access requirements also tend to favor the major parties and pose formidable barriers to new entrants. Lastly, many Americans have a history of voting for one of the major parties, often because they feel the need to choose the lesser of two evils. This habitual voting behavior can be difficult to change, making it harder for new parties to convince voters to take a chance on them.
Noel brings up several important obstacles, and I'd like to expand on some of them. Another challenge that new parties face is the perception that they are spoilers. In a close election, a third-party candidate may be blamed for splitting the vote and helping the major party candidate they least align with to win. This fear of spoilers can discourage voters from supporting new parties, even if they better represent their views. Furthermore, ballot access requirements vary from state to state and can be onerous for new parties, requiring them to gather a significant number of signatures or meet other stringent criteria. This can be a logistical and financial challenge, especially for smaller parties with limited resources. Ultimately, the lack of legislative representation for third parties at the federal level, such as in Congress, further solidifies the two-party system. New parties have to overcome these structural disadvantages, making it a formidable uphill battle to become competitive in the current democratic system of the USA.
Can you expand on structural disadvantages for new parties to grow?
Certainly, the structural disadvantages for new parties to grow in the United States are substantial and multifaceted. First and foremost, the winner-takes-all, first-past-the-post electoral system is a significant obstacle. In this system, a candidate with the most votes in a given district wins, while all other votes essentially count for nothing. This discourages voters from supporting third parties, as they are often seen as spoilers who can inadvertently help the major party candidate they least prefer. Moreover, the ballot access requirements vary widely from state to state and can be quite burdensome for new parties. These requirements can include collecting a large number of petition signatures or meeting stringent registration criteria. The logistical and financial challenges of meeting these requirements can be daunting for smaller parties with limited resources. Another structural disadvantage is the lack of proportional representation in most U.S. elections. In a proportional representation system, the number of seats a party wins in a legislature corresponds more closely to its share of the popular vote. In the United States, however, it's an all-or-nothing game, with the winning party taking everything. This discourages people from voting for new parties, as they often feel their vote will have no real impact. Finally, the major parties control the political debate and discourse, making it difficult for new parties to gain media attention and present their platforms effectively. Access to televised debates, which can significantly boost a candidate's visibility and credibility, is typically reserved for the major party candidates. This further limits the ability of new parties to grow and gain influence. In summary, the structural disadvantages for new parties to grow in the USA are deeply ingrained in the electoral and political system, making it a formidable challenge for them to break the duopoly and gain competitiveness.
Do big donors and lobbyists play a role in mainlining duopoly?
Yes, big donors and lobbyists undeniably play a significant role in maintaining the duopoly in the United States. The financial power of major donors and corporate interests has an outsized influence on the political system. Both major parties rely heavily on campaign contributions from these entities to fund their campaigns. This dependence on large donors can make it challenging for new parties to compete, as they often lack access to the same financial resources. The duopoly, in turn, perpetuates policies and positions that align with the interests of these donors and lobbyists, making it harder for alternative voices to gain a foothold in the political landscape. In essence, the financial backing of big donors and lobbyists reinforces the status quo and reinforces the duopoly's hold on American politics.
I agree with Noel that the role of big donors and lobbyists is a significant factor in maintaining the duopoly. The financial influence of major corporations and special interest groups often leads to policy decisions and legislation that favor their interests. This, in turn, reinforces the major parties' reliance on these influential donors. The major parties may be hesitant to adopt policies that could alienate their major contributors, making it challenging for new parties with different, potentially more grassroots, funding sources to compete. Additionally, the lobbying industry has a strong presence in Washington, further perpetuating the influence of the duopoly. All of these factors combine to maintain the status quo and hinder the growth of alternative political parties in the United States.
Do most big donor fund both parties?
Yes, it is a common practice for many big donors to fund both major parties in the United States. This is often referred to as bipartisan giving. These donors do so to hedge their bets and maintain influence, regardless of which party is in power. They understand that the political landscape can shift, and by supporting both parties, they can ensure access and favorability no matter who is in office. While this practice might seem pragmatic to some, it can contribute to the perception that both major parties are beholden to the same set of wealthy interests, further reinforcing the notion of a political duopoly.
Indeed, it's a well-documented fact that many big donors opt to fund both major parties. By doing so, they establish themselves as influential players in the political arena, regardless of which party holds power. This practice can perpetuate a perception among the public that the major parties are closely aligned in terms of the interests they serve, further contributing to the duopoly's stronghold on American politics. While big donors may argue that they are merely exercising their right to support their preferred candidates, the reality is that their contributions can have the effect of limiting the diversity of voices and ideas within the political system.
Why money is a factor in political campaigns?
Money plays a significant role in political campaigns for several reasons. First and foremost, running a political campaign requires a considerable amount of resources, which includes advertising, campaign staff, travel expenses, and technology. Money is essential to cover these costs and ensure that a candidate can effectively communicate their message to a wide audience. In a media-driven world, having the financial means to run TV ads, social media campaigns, and other promotional efforts can greatly impact a candidate's visibility and reach among voters. Moreover, money allows candidates to organize grassroots efforts, conduct polls, and analyze data to make informed strategic decisions. It also enables them to engage in robust fundraising efforts, which, in turn, can bring in more financial support from individual donors. In summary, money is a factor in political campaigns because it is a practical necessity for candidates to operate effectively and compete in a modern political landscape.
I agree with Noel on the importance of money in political campaigns. In the contemporary political environment, campaigns have become increasingly sophisticated and data-driven. Money is necessary to hire experienced campaign staff and consultants who can manage complex operations, develop effective messaging, and utilize advanced targeting techniques to reach potential voters. Additionally, money allows candidates to travel extensively, attending events, rallies, and town hall meetings to connect with constituents. Fundraising itself is a critical aspect of a campaign, as it provides the resources needed for advertising, voter outreach, and ground game efforts. Without a sufficient financial base, candidates may struggle to make their voices heard and effectively compete in the political arena. Therefore, money is a crucial factor in political campaigns because it enables candidates to effectively communicate their message and connect with the electorate.
Is it about the content or the hype? When a party can publish its political manifesto on social media, they can have reach and interact with people on social media and internet. Is it time to restrict the use of money to even the field?
It's an important and nuanced question. While social media and the internet have opened up new channels for parties to publish their political manifestos and interact with the public, the role of money in politics is not solely about content or hype. It's also about the resources required to promote that content effectively. While digital platforms have made it easier to disseminate information broadly, they have also led to an escalation in the competition for attention. As a result, candidates and parties still need resources to boost their visibility amidst the vast sea of online content. Therefore, it's a question of both content and resources. Restricting the use of money in politics could level the playing field and allow smaller parties or candidates with less financial backing to compete more effectively.
I agree with Noel to a certain extent. The proliferation of online platforms and social media has indeed made it easier for parties to reach and interact with the public directly. However, the role of money in politics remains critical because even on these platforms, parties often need resources to effectively advertise and promote their content. Additionally, not all parties or candidates have equal access to funds or the ability to mobilize grassroots support. While restrictions on campaign finance can help to level the playing field, it's essential to strike a balance that ensures fair competition while still allowing parties to secure the necessary resources for meaningful political discourse and engagement.
If we allow paid ads from political parties on social media platforms, it not only stifles the growth of smaller parties, the platforms themselves can be compromised to be neutral. Isn't it more helpful to democracy to keep social media platforms political advertisement free?
All the concerns about the impact of political ads on social media platforms are valid. Completely banning political advertisements may not be the best approach. It is crucial to strike a balance between free speech and responsible regulation. Paid ads can provide a platform for political parties, including smaller ones, to reach a broader audience and communicate their message. However, it's essential for social media companies to have strict policies and transparent oversight to ensure the content is not misleading or harmful. Removing political ads entirely might stifle legitimate political discourse and limit opportunities for engagement. Instead, we should focus on regulating and monitoring these ads to maintain a level playing field and protect the integrity of the platforms.
I understand Noel's perspective, but I would argue that the concerns about the undue influence of money in politics, especially on social media, are very real. Political ads can be used to manipulate public opinion, spread disinformation, and create an uneven playing field. Maintaining social media platforms as political advertisement-free zones could protect the integrity of political discourse and safeguard against the influence of big donors. It's essential to strike a balance, perhaps by allowing free, organic content and discussions while limiting the impact of paid political advertising, which often benefits the major parties and those with significant financial resources. This approach could contribute to a healthier and more equitable democratic process.
What are structural changes needed in U.S. democratic system for new parties to grow?
Structural changes in the U.S. democratic system are essential for new parties to have a fair opportunity to grow and thrive. First and foremost, implementing ranked choice voting, RCV, or other forms of proportional representation at various levels of government could be a game changer. RCV allows voters to rank candidates in order of preference, ensuring that if their first choice candidate doesn't win, their vote goes to their second choice. This can mitigate the spoiler effect and encourage more diverse voices to enter the political arena. Moreover, reforming ballot access requirements to make them consistent and less onerous across states is crucial. High signature thresholds and complex registration processes currently hinder new parties from appearing on the ballot in many places. Additionally, introducing public financing for political campaigns can help level the playing field by reducing the reliance on wealthy donors and big money interests. Such public financing should be designed to give equal opportunities to all candidates, regardless of party affiliation. Lastly, fostering more inclusive and open debates, especially at the national level, can grant new parties and candidates greater visibility and help voters make informed choices. Overall, these structural changes would be a significant step toward enabling new parties to grow and contribute to a more vibrant democracy.
I agree with Leon that structural changes are necessary for new parties to grow in the U.S. democratic system. In addition to the points Leon made, another important reform would be to revise the electoral system to move away from a winner-takes-all approach in favor of proportional representation. This would allow parties to be represented in proportion to their popular vote, giving smaller parties a more meaningful presence in legislatures. Furthermore, addressing the issue of gerrymandering is crucial. Gerrymandered districts often favor the two major parties, making it challenging for third parties to gain any representation. Implementing nonpartisan or independent redistricting commissions could help create more competitive and fair electoral districts. In terms of campaign finance, enhancing transparency and enforcing stricter regulations on dark money and political donations can reduce the influence of big donors, thereby providing a more level playing field for new parties and candidates. Ultimately, creating a more inclusive and equitable electoral system is paramount for new parties to grow and bring fresh perspectives and ideas into American politics.
Who has the power to implement these structural changes?
The power to implement these structural changes lies primarily with state legislatures, Congress, and in some cases, the voters themselves through initiatives and referendums.
The authority to enact these structural changes resides in state governments, Congress, and the courts, which can enforce laws that promote fairness and equity in the democratic process.
Do you think these structural changes will be implemented?
It's challenging, but there is a growing awareness of the need for these structural changes. Public pressure and grassroots movements advocating for electoral reform are gaining momentum. While change may be gradual, the possibility of these changes being implemented is increasing.
The implementation of structural changes in the U.S. democratic system is a complex and contentious process. However, the history of American democracy is marked by a series of reforms and adaptations to meet evolving needs. While it may take time, the likelihood of some of these changes being implemented remains, especially as public awareness and demand for electoral reform continue to grow.
Is there any incentive to current political system to implement these structural changes?
The current political system, dominated by the two major parties, may have limited incentives to implement these structural changes, as they benefit from the status quo. However, increasing public demand for reform and the desire to address issues like polarization and disenfranchisement could create incentives for change, especially for politicians seeking to gain a competitive edge by supporting popular reforms.
The incentive for the current political system to implement these structural changes may be limited, as it has historically favored the major parties. However, the potential for increased public engagement, trust in the political process, and a more representative democracy could be strong incentives in the long run. As public demand for change grows, politicians and parties may recognize the need to adapt and embrace reforms that enhance the democratic system.
In current political system, is corporate interest prioritized over citizens' interest?
In the current political system, there is a perception that corporate interests often hold significant sway and are sometimes prioritized over citizens' interests. This perception is fueled by the influence of big money in politics, the power of lobbyists, and the revolving door between government and corporate entities. While this isn't true in every instance, it's a concern that many citizens hold, and it highlights the need for campaign finance reform and increased transparency to address this issue.
The prioritization of corporate interests over citizens' interests is a contentious issue in the current political system. While it's essential to recognize that policies often aim to balance various stakeholder interests, there are instances where corporate influence, through campaign contributions and lobbying, can result in policies that favor economic elites over the broader population. Public perception of this influence is a concern that needs to be addressed through increased transparency, campaign finance reform, and ethical standards in politics to ensure that citizens' interests are consistently upheld.
What can the citizens do to push change duopoly status of political establishment?
Citizens can play a crucial role in pushing for change in the duopoly status of the political establishment. They can start by actively participating in the democratic process through voting in both primary and general elections. Choosing candidates from outside the two major parties and supporting independent or third-party candidates can send a powerful message. Furthermore, citizens can engage in grassroots activism, advocacy, and education to raise awareness about the need for electoral reforms, such as ranked choice voting, campaign finance reform, and fair districting. Supporting organizations and movements that promote these changes can have a significant impact.
I agree with Leon, and I'd add that citizens can also make their voices heard by contacting their representatives and senators to express their support for reforms. Engaging in local politics is another effective way to influence change. Citizens can attend town hall meetings, run for local office, or get involved in political organizations that advocate for reform. Additionally, participating in public demonstrations and spreading awareness about the need for a more inclusive and equitable political system can help shift the status quo. Ultimately, citizen engagement is a powerful force for change in the duopoly status of the political establishment.
Does mainstream media feeds duopoly?
Yes, mainstream media can play a role in feeding the duopoly by providing extensive coverage to the major parties and their candidates. This can create a feedback loop where the major parties receive more attention, which can translate into more voter support, making it difficult for smaller parties or independent candidates to gain visibility. However, it's important to note that media outlets are increasingly recognizing the importance of diverse perspectives and have been giving some attention to third-party and independent candidates in recent years.
I agree with Leon that mainstream media can inadvertently contribute to the duopoly by focusing more on the major parties. While this is a concern, the media landscape is evolving, and there are opportunities for alternative voices to gain exposure through digital platforms and independent journalism. Efforts to encourage more balanced and diverse reporting can help mitigate the impact of mainstream media on the duopoly.
Why does mainstream media feed duopoly?
Mainstream media often feeds the duopoly for several reasons. First, the major parties have established themselves as reliable sources of news, consistently providing content and events that attract audiences. This makes them a natural focus for media outlets. Additionally, the two-party system simplifies political reporting, making it easier to frame narratives around the major parties and their candidates. Furthermore, advertising revenue from major party campaigns and political organizations can be a significant financial incentive for media companies. All of these factors can inadvertently contribute to the focus on the duopoly.
I agree with Leon's points. Mainstream media tends to focus on the duopoly due to the ease of storytelling that it provides. The major parties and their candidates are seen as having a better chance of winning, which makes them a more compelling narrative for news outlets. Furthermore, media organizations often have established relationships with the major parties and their access to sources, events, and advertising revenue. This can create a feedback loop where the media concentrates its attention on the duopoly, inadvertently reinforcing its dominance in the political landscape.
How can mainstream media create more even field for smaller parties for the sake of democracy?
Mainstream media can contribute to a more even playing field for smaller parties by actively seeking out and providing coverage of alternative political voices. They can host debates that include candidates from smaller parties and invite them to participate in interviews and panel discussions. Additionally, media outlets can allocate space and time to showcase a wider range of viewpoints. Moreover, they can refrain from overemphasizing horse race coverage and polling that tends to reinforce the duopoly. A commitment to balanced and inclusive reporting can go a long way in promoting democracy by allowing voters to make more informed choices.
I agree with Noel. Mainstream media can create a more even field for smaller parties by recognizing the importance of diversity in political voices and perspectives. They can dedicate airtime and column space to cover third-party and independent candidates and their platforms. Hosting debates that include a broader range of participants and ensuring fair and balanced reporting can help foster a more inclusive democratic discourse. Moreover, media organizations should take care to avoid overly focusing on the major parties and be open to the idea that political diversity enhances the democratic process.
What are the disagreements between Leon and Noel?
Leon and Noel have expressed differing viewpoints on several issues, including 1. Political duopoly. Leon has argued that the current political system in the United States is a duopoly dominated by the two major parties, while Noel has taken the stance that the USA remains a democracy, highlighting the principles of popular sovereignty, free elections, and individual rights. 2. Campaign finance reform. Leon has emphasized the influence of money in politics and the potential bias in favor of corporate interests, while Noel has acknowledged the issue but suggested that reforms can strike a balance between free speech and responsible regulation. 3. Political advertisement on social media. Leon has suggested that banning political advertisements on social media could help maintain the integrity of political discourse, whereas Noel has advocated for stricter regulation rather than an outright ban to ensure that diverse voices can still be heard. 4. Structural changes for new parties. They have different views on whether structural changes, such as ranked choice voting and proportional representation, are feasible and effective in promoting the growth of new political parties. While Leon and Noel share some common ground on the need for electoral reform and campaign finance regulation, they differ in their approach and level of optimism regarding the implementation of these changes and their impact on the political system.
What are the agreements between Leon and Noel?
Leon and Noel share some common ground on certain issues, including 1. Campaign finance reform. Both Leon and Noel acknowledge the influence of money in politics and express concerns about the impact of big donors and corporate interests on political decision-making. They both advocate for campaign finance reform to address this issue. 2. Need for structural changes. They agree that structural changes are needed in the U.S. political system to create a more equitable and inclusive democratic process. They both support measures like ranked choice voting, proportional representation, and changes to ballot access requirements. 3. Media role in politics. Both Leon and Noel recognize the influence of mainstream media in shaping political narratives and the challenges smaller parties face in getting media coverage. They agree that media can play a role in creating a more level playing field for smaller parties by providing more balanced and inclusive reporting. 4. Importance of citizen engagement. They both emphasize the crucial role of citizen engagement in bringing about political change. They advocate for citizens to actively participate in the democratic process, push for reform, and support alternative voices and candidates. While Leon and Noel have disagreements on the specifics of some issues and the feasibility of certain reforms, they share a common concern for improving the democratic system in the United States and making it more responsive to the needs and voices of citizens.
That's all for now, folks. If you want to continue or join this discussion by asking your own question, please leave the questions in comments. If we get enough interesting questions, I will make another episode asking them and crediting you. Please like, subscribe and push the notification button. Bye.